Hello, welcome back everybody. Thank you for joining me again in my German Grammar for Beginners series. This is lesson 4 already, so just as a very quick reminder, in the previous lessons we have had a general look, a quick glance at German sentence structure for main clauses at least. We have learned how to conjugate regular verbs and we have learned how to conjugate irregular verbs. So this lesson 4 is going to be about irregular conjugation endings, and that might be something you probably have not yet heard about or maybe don't know from your own language depending on what your native language is. So before we dive into that, as I promised you at the end of every lesson, I will give you the solutions to the exercise with which we ended lesson number 3. So we have done an exercise concerning irregular verb conjugations, and at the end of our last lesson I gave you a gap text. So maybe you have received the lesson material from me. If not, please wait or skip to the end of the lesson to find out how you can receive exactly this lesson material that I'm using here, so you can print it out at home and use it. I will explain all about it at the end of every lesson. And if you would like to skip right to the content of this lesson, lesson number 4, maybe just fast forward with about 5 minutes. Otherwise, I'm going to walk you through the solutions of the exercise of lesson number 3. So the task was to add the correct verb conjugated in present tense, specifically for verbs that have a stem change. So that is what defines an irregular verb, when the stem of the verb contains usually a vowel change. So here I provided you with gaps and the translation in brackets behind, so you know what the finalized sentence is supposed to mean. And then let's start with number 1. Wäscht sein Auto is the conjugated form of the infinitive waschen. So we have a stem change and a vowel change from a to ä. Wäscht for second and third person singular, mind you, right? Because the plural forms and the ich forms normally do not contain that change most of the time. Number 2. Läufst du nach Hause? Läufst du nach Hause? Are you walking home? The infinitive form here is laufen. So again, second person singular du. We have a stem change from lauf to läuf, including 2 dots, like an umlaut on top of the a. Laufen becomes läufst. Number 3. Das Baby schläft. Das Baby schläft. The baby is sleeping. The infinitive of this verb is schlafen. So also here we have a stem change from a to ä for third person singular, meaning it or the baby, or he or she, depending on the gender. Number 4. Ich lese oft Bücher. Ich lese oft Bücher. I often read books. So the infinitive of this verb is lesen, lesen, and because we're conjugating it for the first person singular, for the ich, for I, we do not have any stem change. That only occurs for you and he, she, it. Then lesen becomes liest, but conjugated for I, we get ich lese oft Bücher. No change in the stem, right? Number 5. Wir fahren nach München. Wir fahren nach München. The city name is usually a little bit difficult to pronounce for people. München. Please speak after me whenever you can, okay? Wir fahren nach München. So the infinitive of this verb in this case looks exactly the same as the conjugated form. Fahren, wir fahren, has the same conjugation ending, so you don't see a change here. And plurals never contain a vowel change, so you don't need to change it to fährst, for example, as you would for the du form. Number 6. Wer ist das? Ich weiß nicht. Wer ist das? Ich weiß nicht. So who is this? I don't know. So we conjugated the verb wissen. The infinitive form is wissen, which is very irregular in all singular forms, including the I form, ich, du, er, sie, es, all irregular. Ich weiß, du weißt, er weiß, and then back to normal for plural. Wir wissen, ihr wisst, sie wissen. Okay, I don't know, ich weiß nicht. Number 7. Sie nimmt einen Keks. Sie nimmt einen Keks. She takes a cookie. What is the infinitive of this verb here? Right, nehmen, nehmen. And nehmen also contains a full stem change, not only in the vowel, but also in the consonants. And because sie is third person singular, we change from nehm to nimm, and then we add the t as the conjugation ending for third person singular. Sie nimmt einen Keks. Number 8. Wir tragen das Sofa. Wir tragen das Sofa. Okay, so tragen can mean carry, like in the case of furniture here, or to wear clothing. Ja? Ich trage ein Kleid. I wear a dress, for example. And because it's plural, there is no stem change. Wir is first person plural, so we do not need to change the verb stem. We simply add en as the conjugation ending, and then it looks the same as the infinitive form. Wir tragen. Number 9, we're nearly done. Er gibt ihr seine Nummer. Er gibt ihr seine Nummer. He gives her his number. Okay, so you don't need to understand all of the other grammar aspects in this sentence here. You probably see there is an object in dative case, there is an object in accusative case, and all of these changes are going to be explained in later lessons. For the time being, I would like you to please passively understand them only. Try to absorb the vocabulary so you will be able to recognize it. But for now, please only focus on the verbs, because those are the most important elements of any sentence. And as soon as we have a solid basis with the verbs, we're going to move quickly enough to the cases, believe me. It's going to come very quickly. Okay, so the infinitive of this verb is geben. Geben, to give. And that changes in its conjugated form for the second and third person singular to the verb stem, gib, gib. And then we add the t as the conjugation ending for he, she, it. Er gibt ihr seine Nummer. And last but not least, number 10. Weißt du, wie spät es ist? Speak after me, please, yeah? Weißt du, wie spät es ist? So you do see German has a lot of S sounds, and we differentiate our S sounds quite a lot, probably more than other languages do. So maybe it sounds a little bit weird or sharp or funny to you, depending on your native language. But please listen carefully what kind of sh, s, ch sounds we actually have. I know it's many. Weißt du, wie spät es ist? So you see when you combine SP, it's not going to be spät. It's going to be spät. Spät. So actually that means, do you know how late it is? Okay, so we conjugate again. Wissen, to know, that is the infinitive. The stem changes for du, for second person singular. Weißt du, wie spät es ist? Okay, that was a very quick, no, maybe it wasn't that quick, quick enough revision of the solutions to the exercise for lesson number 3. And lesson number 4 is going to contain its own exercises also. So let's get back to lesson 4 now and talk about irregular conjugation endings in present tense. So I would like to make one distinction very clear to you. This is the takeaway message that I would like you to conclude each of my lessons with. So when we conjugate verbs in German, we take the verb stem of that verb, of that infinitive, and we add a conjugation ending. And depending on whether the verb is a regular verb or whether it is irregular, the verb stem will either change or not. Okay, so regular verbs are defined by the fact that their verb stem does not change throughout their conjugated forms. So when we take an infinitive, lesen, lesen, we obtain the verb stem by eliminating the en ending of any German verb. Okay, we eliminate en, we get the stem, les, les, okay? And the fact that lesen changes its verb stem when we conjugate it defines the fact that it is an irregular verb. Okay, so regular verbs do not contain such a change as we saw in the previous exercise. However, independently from whether the verb that we conjugate is regular or irregular, sometimes the conjugation endings also show an irregularity. But still, the verb itself can be completely regular. So when the verb stem ends in certain consonants, the conjugation endings differ from their usual forms. They will differ from the forms that you saw in lesson number 2, where I showed you regular verb conjugations. So now let's see what this looks like in practice. Okay. When we have German verb stems that end, so after eliminating en, the stem will end in d, t, n, or m. We do have certain irregularities in the endings of the conjugation. So I would like to quickly remind you, the regular conjugation endings are e, st, t, in, t, in, okay? But because this verb here, you see, it does not change its verb stem when you conjugate it, right? It stays the same all the time. Arbeiten, arbeiten, meaning to work, remains unchanged as a verb stem throughout the entire conjugation. So we have an irregularity with a regular verb here. Still, due to the fact that the stem ends in a T, we feel it is very uncomfortable to pronounce if we do not insert another, let's call it a transitionary E, okay? So even for German standards of pronunciation, it sounds uncomfortable to say du arbeitst, du arbeitst. You know, I know German pronunciation does often sound uncomfortable still, but we perceive it as unfortunate to pronounce TST in a row without filling another vowel in. That is why we will insert this E sound here whenever we want to move from a D, T, N, or M straight to a theoretically consonant in the conjugation ending. So we will actually insert an E in the du, RCS, and ihr forms, so in the second and third person singular and in the second person plural. And that is what all of these have in common, so it doesn't matter if it is a D, T, N, or M. All of them will have these filling transitionary E's in order to ease the pronunciation. Okay, so when we conjugate it, we will actually say ich arbeite, du arbeitest, not arbeitst, du arbeitest. Sie, es arbeitet, wir arbeiten, ihr arbeitet, sie arbeiten. Okay, and the same applies to verb stems ending in a D. I have chosen the example reden here, meaning to talk. Reden. So you see this verb is completely regular, no stem change, but an irregularity in the endings that are caused by the D in which the verb stem ends. So we conjugate as ich rede, du redest, ihr redet, wir reden, ihr redet, sie reden. Okay, and to our ears that sounds more comfortable like this. And then with N and M, I would like you to notice that not all verbs that will end in an N or an M in their verb stem will automatically have this change. It depends on the consonant combinations, but if I start explaining every single combination and how they end up, what endings they take, you will finish this lesson very frustrated and confused. So I would like you to notice that you will come across verbs that end in an N or an M that take these changes, but you will also encounter some of them that do not. Okay, so it is not a necessary condition. It is something that does occur in certain instances, and I would like you to understand where this E comes from. It's in order to ease the pronunciation. So for the verbs öffnen and atmen, öffnen to open, atmen to breathe, we will conjugate ich öffne, du öffnest, er öffnet, wir öffnen, ihr öffnet, sie öffnen. Okay, and for atmen, ich atme, du atmest, er atmet, wir atmen, ihr atmet, sie atmen. And the more often I say it, the more stupid it sounds. Do you know, when you sometimes repeat things so many times that they sound like they no longer make sense? That definitely happens with me when I conjugate from time to time. So, please note, DT, NM will often, but not always, require a filling E for the pronunciation. Okay, if you need a mental help or an aid, because this might be difficult for you to remember, you can think of you can create example sentences in your head that start with the letters that you want to remember. So when I need to explain it to someone, I always tell them, just imagine you're trying to tell someone, do not touch me. D-N-T-M. Do not touch me, okay? These letters will normally take that E in the irregular conjugation endings that we just spoke about, okay? Now, there's another change that sometimes occurs when we have verb stems that end in some sort or form of an S sound in German, okay? So all of these letters that you see down here are considered S sounds in the German language. We have a normal S, we have a double S, we have this letter here, which looks quite peculiar. We call it SZ. So the name of this letter here is SZ. It is actually nothing else than double S in the old German spelling, but some words are spelled differently now. And Z, which in German is also called Z. So this is SZ, this is Z. And all of these together are considered S sounds, which require merely one change when you conjugate it. And this change only applies to the second person singular, to the do form. And why is that? Because it is the only conjugation that normally ends in ST, right? So for regular verbs, the normal conjugation ending for second person singular is ST. However, because we already do have an S sound at the end of our verb stem, we drop it here, okay? And as a result of that, the conjugated do form will take the same look and form and shape as the conjugated he, she, it form, okay? So for example, with the verb reisen, bear in mind, I'm not saying reisen, okay? It's not s, it's z. For English speakers, particularly a bit difficult. So our single S sounds like a Z in English, okay? Reisen, to travel, is conjugated as ich reise, du reist, er, sie, es reist, identical, right? Wir reisen, ihr reist, sie reisen, okay? And same will happen when we look at the next example, our infinitive heißen. And now you see this letter here corresponds phonetically to an S in English. So this is Z, this is S, okay? It's sharper. Heißen means to be called. That's how we say our names. We normally do not say my name is, we say I am called. So ich heiße Stefanie. Ich heiße Stefanie. Und du? Wie heißt du? Okay, so also this is an S sound. Our verb stem is very regular, but it ends in an S sound, so we will drop the S from the ST ending in the do form. Therefore, also here, second and third person singular are going to look identical. And we will conjugate as ich heiße, du heißt, er, sie, es heißt. Wir heißen, ihr heißt, sie heißen. Okay, and then two more examples, one for a double S and one for a Z. And here, okay, I'll come to that in a minute. Let's start with this one first. Fassen, among other things, normally means like to grab, yeah, to grab something. Double S sound, we drop the S from the ST, therefore we conjugate ich fasse, du fasst, er fasst, wir fassen, ihr fasst, sie fassen. And by the way, this can apply to irregular verbs also, so you will come across verbs that have a stem change and an irregular conjugation ending if that stem also ends in an S sound, okay? So it has nothing to do with regular or irregular stems. It merely has to do with phonetics, with the phonology, whether or not we need this change. So this lesson here applies to both regular and irregular verbs, okay? That is very important to bear in mind. Please do not confuse. And then our last infinitive here, where is my cursor? There it is, okay. Tanzen. So an English speaker will normally want to say tanzen. No. Our Z is pronounced like TS in German, TS. So imagine you would spell it with a TS instead of a Z, and then you would say tanzen. That is how we pronounce our Z in German, okay? Meaning to dance. And also a Z is considered an S sound, so we will drop the ST, we will only keep the T, and we conjugate ich tanze, du tanzt, Also here we have NZT, which sounds very uncomfortable for speakers of other languages, but obviously for the inventors of the German language this was fine. So we say du tanzt, er tanzt, wir tanzen, ihr tanzt, sie tanzen. Okay, so it is very difficult for me to give you an abbreviated sentence using these letters, but if you would like to combine them all together, you could try to remember: do not touch me, scoundrel. Sorry, this is a bit stupid, but maybe it helps. Okay, so the stupider it is, the more difficult it is to forget. So that is how I remember which letters require this change when I explain it to my students. Okay, so DT and M and all forms of S sounds will require changes in the conjugation ending. Sometimes we need to add something, like here, and sometimes we need to drop something, like here. All right? And then we already arrived at our exercise time. And like always, I will introduce the exercise to you. I will invite you to please receive the lesson material from me, print it out, solve the exercise, okay, find your solutions, and then come back at the beginning of lesson number 5. I will give you the solutions to lesson number 4, okay, to the exercise of lesson number 4. So here, what I want you to do is merely to focus on adding the correct conjugation endings to the verb stems that I already provided here. And of course, I'm using verbs that fall into one of the categories that I just explained to you. So either they end in a DT and M, do not touch me, scoundrel, or they end in some sort of an S sound, okay? And I want you to identify if the person that you are conjugating it for requires such an irregular ending or maybe not, okay? Because it doesn't apply to all forms. It only applies, look here, this change only applies to du, sie, es, and ihr, and this change only applies to do. So please do not use this irregularity for all the conjugations. You need to differentiate who is the subject of our sentence, okay? So in this first sentence here, we have do as the subject, and therefore we need to take that into account when adding the conjugation ending. So please either obtain the lesson material or take a screenshot, find your solutions, and come back for lesson number 5 to check and compare your answers with me. So, and now finally, in order to obtain this material that I'm using here for my lessons, please just write me a very brief informal email to my email address, stephanie.bitteaufdeutsch@gmail.com, and then I will take you into my newsletter or into my mailing list. So every time I publish a new lesson, you will receive the lesson material that I'm using in that lesson as a PDF document. So you can print it out, you can take notes, and you can collect a nice booklet. Okay, so thank you very much for watching. Once again, I'm looking forward to seeing you again in lesson number 5. I appreciate your interest, and Merry Christmas, everyone. Okay, see you soon. Tschüss.